Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to jump right into the conversation. And our topic is around advertising and advertising as a service to consumers. So, Shannon, let's talk about advertising today. Do you feel it is in service to consumers, or do you think there are areas where it's actually a disservice to consumers?
Yeah. I think consumers would tell you that a lot of advertising is annoying, right? So if you talk to, I just don't have to show it. It's very nice of you, but thank you. If you talk to my 16-year-old daughter, for instance, I don't know if any of you have teenage children and you work in advertising business, but the first thing I get is, ugh, another ad. Every time she sees an ad, it's my fault, by the way. So no matter who's running advertising out there, you're welcome. I'm taking the blame in my house for all of the ads that we put into market. And she's annoyed by it, right? She's rightfully annoyed by it. And it goes to a bunch of things. Consumers in the U.S. at least see 5 to 10,000 ad units a day. They're scrolling at 5,000 pixels per second. They're running through the volume of advertising is just phenomenal, and they're spending
Absolutely.
right. They're spending over 13 hours a day with media. So when you
Yes.
consider how much advertising they're seeing in that space, and we're opening up more and more places to put advertising, which for advertisers is a great thing. Thank you to all of our retail media networks for coming into the game. Thank you to all of the CTV platforms for coming into the game, right? We are getting more and more places to put this advertising, but I think it means we need to work harder. And I think there's a
Absolutely.
tremendous opportunity for us to make advertising a service to the consumer.
And speaking about that and what we need to change, how much of that do you think is media versus creative and messaging, or do you think it's an equal accountability between both?
Yeah. Do you remember there was a study done, I want to say 5 years ago or so, that said something about 70% of ad effectiveness is the creative, right?
Yes.
And I think every media person heard that statistic and went, yes! Finally, we have some place to put the effectiveness problem, and it's not all on
Right.
us because media gets blamed for the effectiveness, right?
Absolutely.
We control the CPM, we control the volume of impressions, we
Right.
control the audience that you're reaching. So clearly, something went wrong.
Right.
It's definitely media's fault, right? And so I think when that study first came out and said that 70% of the effectiveness was in the creative, we all had this moment of like, yeah, there's the message matters in this moment, and I think that is still very much true.
Yes.
And I think you see it in how consumers respond and behave to influencer messaging, right? So you have
Yes.
this incredible influencer messaging. Their message resonates because it's authentic, because it's humorous, because it has some kind of educational or entertainment value. And I think there is a space where we as brands have to step up and make sure that the creative is worthy of the placement,
Absolutely.
and the audience's time.
Right. Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with targeting and GDPR, CCPA. I mean, obviously, a lot of conversation in the industry around privacy legislation. Do you think that can help us get on a better path to be more in service to consumers and have a better advertising experience? And as an industry, do you think we can make progress to regulate ourselves?
Oh, ooh, that's a deep question. Okay, so let's go in a couple of directions here because I think the targeting piece is super interesting to me. In general, the targeting piece, not just to me. I think it's interesting to us as an industry. There's a few schools of thought on this, right? So there is the we should get to personalization at scale conversation, and we all
Right.
want to talk about like narrow, narrow, narrow. I just want to put my impression in front of the person who is actually going to buy my product. You want a coral colored lipstick, and I only want to serve you coral colored lipsticks.
Right.
The problem is you may actually be really interested in a red lipstick. But because I didn't serve you a red lipstick, you don't know that I actually make a red. I mean, you probably do know I make a red lipstick, but you don't know I make a red lipstick.
But I don't know what your latest red lipstick is.
Exactly, exactly. And so the opportunity to make sure that I create a serendipitous moment for you versus a controlled moment for you is important. And so there is this balance that we have to strike. I do think personalization and targeting and focusing on the right consumers in the right places with the right message at the right time has a tremendous amount of value. But when you only head in that direction, you then head down a narrow and narrow funnel and you continue to just talk to yourself. When you open that aperture, you have the opportunity to discover new consumers who might be interested in your products that might not have known that you existed otherwise, that you might have not realized are interested in your brand.
Right.
And that's a tremendous opportunity for reaching an entirely new audience. You go, oh, I didn't realize that there is this whole other consumer segment that actually is interested in this. Now, so I'll give you a perfect example. My son is at the University of Minnesota. He's studying chemical engineering. He's the biggest nerd you've ever met. Love this kid. moved out to Minnesota, met a girl, has a girlfriend, has this cute little apartment. They've now moved in together 2 years. I don't know, torture me. He wears black nail polish. This is a kid who's never worn nail polish in his life. He's not goth. He's straight. I don't know why he's wearing nail polish, except he really likes it. And it makes him really happy.
Great.
And if I didn't market nail polish to him, I would have never known that he was potentially a nail polish consumer.
Right.
And now he is. And when the Packers are playing, he's in green and yellow. And we have found the exact SE colors to be the Packers green and yellow.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great example of how you have to strike that balance.
Right.
100%. You and I have been in the industry for a long time.
Yeah.
Do you feel, as we kind of look ahead to third-party cookie deprecation, that everything that's old is becoming new again? And specifically when we talk about the value of contextual.
Yeah, it does. It does feel like we're kind of revisiting an old friend, doesn't it?
It does. Very much so.
But I think the opportunity in that space is so exciting. And I think we spent so much time focusing on the targeting, that we forgot that there is moments where adjacencies matter. My grandmother used to say, tell me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are. Right?
Mhm.
You are the company that you keep. It's just a good reminder to know who your friends are.
Absolutely.
But also a really interesting analogy to our industry, because I do think it matters where we place our ads, not just that we're in front of the right person. And the the opportunity we took as a digital media industry was to say, I don't care about where, I care about who.
Mm-hmm.
And we all got very excited about the who and not necessarily the where.
The where.
And I think we've learned as we've watched sites pop up that are nothing but made for advertising. You've got a friend. Oh, should we give him a microphone?
Might have something to say.
He might. He likes targeting. But I think as we've focused in on making sure that we were getting to this person as opposed to place, you have made for advertising websites. You have advertising that is chasing the same consumer around over and over again that we're all really annoyed by. You have the inability to necessarily control the frequency that you want to control.
Right.
We've created all of these problems for ourselves.
Yes.
And I think the moment to step back and say it matters when you see my ad next to a piece of content that is of the quality,
Right.
first of all, and then you get into contextual. And I had this really interesting moment. I was quite honored to speak at the Google Brandcast event 2 years ago, which was super exciting. And I got quoted in a New York Times article, which was really cool.
Nice.
Right? So
Yes.
moment of pride, New York Times article, you see your name, you're like, oh, that's super exciting. It was actually my son who sent me a link to the article. And I read it online, and I was like, that's really, really cool. That was on a Friday. The following Monday, the article appeared in print. And it was my son that I texted back and said, look, it's actually in the print edition too. And he went, oh, now that's really cool. And I was like, wait a minute. That's really interesting, because you're that generation that like everything is digital.
Right.
So wasn't it just cool enough that I was in the New York Times online? And he was like, no, there's something so real.
It's tangible.
It's tangible. And when you think about what is, and not that we're talking about print necessarily, but to talk about print for a second, when you think about what gets chosen to be placed in that physical edition, it is not an unlimited scroll.
Right.
It is not an unlimited ecosystem of cloud computing that can take on that content. It is a limited and finite piece of physical material. What gets chosen to be put there has weight and meaning.
Well, there's
And I think there's something so
intentionality
important.
around it. There has to be intentionality.
Yeah.
And there has to be a strong belief that it's going to resonate with the audience
Right.
and the readers.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's fantastic.
Yeah, kind of cool.
Let's pivot just a little bit and talk about L'Oreal.
Okay.
I mean, you've been there a long time. It's a
3 years.
110-year-old brand. You've got a very, very diverse set of brands, a lot of different products, and a lot of longtime loyal consumers.
Yes.
How are you balancing retaining your core base, if you will, of consumers, but also bringing in the next generation?
Yeah, that's an everyday conversation in our business. You're right, 110-year-old business, 36 or 38 brands, depending on what market you're in. Brands that I'm hoping everybody in this room uses. Any CeraVe users out there? CeraVe, La Roche-Posay,
Yes.
Kerastase,
Yes.
Redken maybe,
Yes.
Vichy.
Yes.
Yeah, love you guys. Maybelline, Lancome,
Lancome.
NYX, Yeah. Okay. See, I love brand loyalists. Thank
SkinCeuticals.
you. SkinCeuticals.
One of my
yes.
favorites.
Well, this is why we look so young. SkinCeuticals. SkinCeuticals is amazing. Skin Better
Yes.
Sciences, also recent acquisition. Just truly an incredible set of brands, and brands that I jokingly and not so jokingly say we have products for people who have skin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty easy to step into our portfolio no matter where you are.
Right.
And so staying relevant, you're absolutely right, to our core consumers, and then also bringing in the next generation of consumers. We have built incredible brands, and these brands have incredible stories to tell, and they have incredible efficacy in the marketplace. We cannot ignore our core consumers, the ones who have been with us
Right.
over and over again for years and years
Absolutely.
and years, generational
Mhm.
consumers even, right? Like I consider myself a generational Lancome consumer because it was my mother's brand, it was my grandmother's brand,
Right.
and I picked it up at one point in
Mhm.
my expression, and it became a part of my
Sure.
ecosystem as well. And it wasn't just because I aged, it was because the products were that good, and I
Right.
finally got to a place where I could afford them.
Right.
And so the trajectory of bringing consumers in is interesting because you will have those generational brands. We have to make sure that we still continue to meet the consumer where they are from an advertising perspective. So understanding where that existing customer is spending her time, where she is experiencing content, where she's experiencing storytelling is important. And so we do spend a lot of time researching and understanding them. Now, we are a very fortunate CPG business because we are not your typical CPG business in that we also have direct-to-consumer brands.
Mm-hmm.
And that CRM database, that richness of being able to communicate directly with you as a SkinCeuticals consumer or as a Lancome consumer, obviously makes it easier for us to continue to build that. But we are also a very large advertiser on TikTok, and we do a lot with Instagram Reels, and we are in YouTube and all over Shorts, right? So we are leaning into all of the modern platforms with consumers. Now, I will say quite clearly, we do not advertise to anyone under the age of 18. All of my targeting is over 18. If a brand wants to come and have a conversation with us about, hey, we really think this could be 16 plus, we have to give them custom permission to do 16 plus. And that is very, very rare.
Interesting. So it sounds like it's a multifaceted program across all the brands.
Yeah.
How much of bringing in the next generation is because of grandma, mom? I mean, how much of that
Yeah.
is part of it, and is that ever part of your messaging strategy?
Well, sure. Go back to all of the research that we did that said, not us, but just in general as an industry that we did that said, what are the things that influence your purchase, right? The number one thing that's always on that list is friends and family. Right? And I think that can't be more true than in the world of beauty, cosmetics, and skincare, and especially skincare, which is generational, but it's also cultural. Skincare can be a very cultural because I know my skin, I am of this culture, you are also of this culture, this is the product that will work for you. A family member who has eczema, you have eczema, and therefore I can help you find that product that's going to get you there. So there is a lot of generational. We don't do it a lot in the messaging. Because the generational, I think, and it's interesting because I should take it back to the brands and see if they want to do it in the messaging, so we might do that. But I think that a lot of it, we expect that generational conversation is already happening. We just need to make it top of mind so that the conversation happens.
Great. What role do you think, because obviously we're here and we've probably heard it multiple times in conversations, what role do you see AI playing? Or what role is AI currently playing?
So it's interesting. We just rolled out a new taxonomy, a naming convention for all of our media and advertising across the globe, actually, which is super exciting to be able to start to pull all of those insights together across all of the different assets, across the entire ecosystem across the world. One of the things that I asked the team to add into it is campaigns that are running on machine learning or artificial intelligence as a piece of the decisioning for that particular campaign. And so we're adding that into the naming convention so that we can actually start to measure it. But it's interesting when you sit down and you talk to the team and you say, hey, how much are we doing on artificial intelligence and machine learning as it relates to our media buying? Most of it. Right? Because when you think about especially programmatic media today, most of it is driven by some type of machine learning or artificial intelligence that is making the decision on what to bid for, what not to bid for, et cetera. So most of it, social media, et cetera, is already in that space. Where I think the AI gets really interesting is in the creative space. And I think it's not my world to own. right? So I say this with a caution of like, I'm the media kid,
Right.
and we have a bunch of creative kids, and that's their job. But I think what I'm starting to see that I find fascinating is the speed with which the AI can help the creatives
Yes.
do something differently. And I'll give you one very pointed example. There is a need to create a headline on product landing pages. And that headline is only so many characters long,
Mhm.
and you know that you're about to launch a new product, or you've got 5 new launches coming this year, et cetera, or you're just optimizing it for a sale that you're about to do, et cetera. The time it takes for a creative to sit with an Excel spreadsheet that has a count formula and make sure that they got the number of characters right and it's not over or under, and to tinker with the
Right.
words or not tinker with the words is honestly a waste of time.
Yes.
Because if they can train the AI to
Mhm.
say, hey, I need a headline, it needs to be only 200 characters long, and it needs to be in this brand ethos, and we can have a private instance of an AI that understands that brand's messaging, that brand's way of communicating, the language that it uses, etc., it spits out 5 versions of the headline in about 2 seconds, and then the creative's job is to edit.
Right.
And that's where their job becomes most interesting anyway, as opposed to constantly tinkering with this little bitty back
Absolutely.
and forth. And I think that's going to game change the volume of what we can get into the market at speed.
Yeah. I mean, the efficiency and just the speed to market. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Absolutely.
I mean, I work for a technology-based company,
Mhm.
so I would love to hear, to the degree that you can share, what other technologies excite you inside L'Oreal from a media and or kind of bringing media and creative together from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the AI piece is super exciting to me. There's no doubt about it. I think there's so much opportunity for us from a creative perspective. I geek out about the measurement.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably because of my background, right? I grew up in the digital side. I was a digital kid. We measured everything. And so I really love having the ability to be able to measure it all. And from the measurement side, I am getting excited about things like cross-media measurement that we're doing with the ANA. I sit on the board of the ANA. If anybody's not familiar with CMM, please make yourself familiar with CMM. We're doing a lot of work in that space to try and get to a place where we can actually control for and measure for cross-media frequency. And I'm so excited about what that's actually going to do for us. There's a similar project by the WFA being managed out of the UK. So if you're in the Eurozone, you can look at the WFA project. But both of them are headed ultimately in the same direction. So I'm excited to get to cross media measurement. I'm really excited about the retail media space. There is so much opportunity, I think, in the retail media space too. And I know some of the announcements that came from the trade desk this last week about bringing Albertsons and some of the other retail media measurement together into kind of one column, right? So that we can start to understand across retailer performance. When we start to bring advertising performance together in one place with common language and common measurement is when all boats rise. And I think if we go back to the early days of digital ad serving, the beauty of being able to put everything into Atlas or everything into DoubleClick. Dart, does anybody remember Dart?
I do.
Yeah, I still have a Dart pen. Yeah, that's OG. I also have a Running Man jacket for AOL. That's a whole nother. My .com graveyard. So but the putting everything into one ad server as a third-party measurement solution that said we're going to deduplicate this information and understand what worked where. We need to we seem to have lost track of that with the new players that are coming into the market. And we need to fix that because that is the power of being able to see how your advertising is performing. And it's also, to the point of the consumer experience, it's a better experience for the consumer. And by not having that connectivity, we've created a terrible user experience at the end of the day, which is why I go back to my 16-year-old daughter who hates our advertising. Not our advertising. She just hates advertising in general. And I keep trying to remind her it's paying for college someday. So
Well, I mean, the younger generations just don't find as much value there because there's not the appropriate frequency capping. I mean, we have in my opinion, rotated on some of the targeting. We've lost the value, the contextual. So I think we're in an interesting time in space where, like I said, a lot of those things are coming back. And we've talked a lot about digital, but obviously as the head of media, you have responsibility for omnichannel, for everything. How are you thinking about bringing everything together and really looking at it from a holistic standpoint? Can you go a little bit deeper on that?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of most of the media channels today is that they can be connected through digital platforms, right?
Yes.
So I can do programmatic out of home, I can do programmatic audio, the
Yes.
connectivity that I can create in that space, but it's not always the right thing to do.
Correct.
And I think that's an interesting tipping point is understanding strategically when you should buy something through the programmatic tech stack. This guy really likes us,
Yes.
hey buddy. When you should buy something through the programmatic tech stack and when you should buy it directly. And so we've created a few frames internally to try and give our planning teams the understanding and the expertise to make some of those decisions. And it could be as simple of, is it an integrated program? Is there custom content, custom creative? Is it going to be in a space in place that doesn't exist in the programmatic tech stack? That's an easy answer.
Yes.
Or is it because when you do buy these things programmatically, you're also then paying tech fees on top of it?
Yes.
Or is this an entire campaign that actually doesn't connect to any other digital ecosystem, and so therefore paying for the tech fee doesn't make sense, and so like it's just going to cost us more? That seems silly as well. But if you have a if you have a campaign that is highly digital, and you can buy all of those channels programmatically, then I highly recommend it because it allows you to start to see at least some of that frequency, some of that control, some of that unified reporting. The one place that obviously that doesn't exist is in print.
Right.
Print is our one major outlier in that space. But the space we didn't cover yet, if I can bring it up, is advocacy and influencer.
Yes.
And it's such a wild west right now. And I think there's so much opportunity for us to build structure and frame and governance around that space to honestly make it better for the influencers to get more out of the advertisers. I think the advertisers would be a lot more comfortable putting more into that space if we did have the same levers and controls that we have across more traditional media. And I don't see, maybe this is me being naive, I don't see where an influencer who is huge and famous is any different than the Oprah Winfreys of her time or the Martha Stewarts of their time, right? They're on multiple platforms. They're telling content. They're building stories. It's their brand. They are the name behind the brand.
Absolutely.
To me, it's not different.
Great. L'Oreal is known for sustainability. You've won a lot of awards. Can you talk a little bit about how that shapes your go-to-market and how you bring that into your decisions from a media and marketing standpoint?
It's one of the many reasons I'm so proud to work for this company. Not just sustainability, but also what we do in DE&I initiatives as well. It's very easy to have L'Oreal be a company you're proud to work for, and it's partially because we make decisions based on what is best for the planet and for the consumer before we make them for what's best on our profit. And I know that sounds strange because we all have shareholders to answer to at the end of the day, but I think we approach it a little bit differently, and we do approach it with that long-term view. From a media perspective, we are partnering with Impact Plus, we are partnering with Scope 3, we are looking at all of the different opportunities that are in the marketplace to try and better understand both how to clean up the supply chain so that we can streamline that part of the process, but also clean up our own approach to the market, whether it's streamlining what creative we put out there, making sure that the weight of that creative is lighter. I also want to hold our media partners accountable for it as well, right? So
absolutely,
as we think about who's performing for us, what ad units they're putting into place, what number of ad calls that they have on their sites, I want to start to partner with folks like we have a partnership with the IAS to understand the volume that's happening in that space and see how I optimize my campaign for the partners who are leaning in on their side as well. And that may lead us to make some different decisions in our investment.
Sure.
And I'm okay with that.
That's great. Kind of building a little bit more on DE&I and just knowing the priority that is for the company and for you. How have you really made sure that comes through in your advertising and that you're being inclusive of all audiences?
Yeah. So I try to look at it's not just me, look at the DE&I initiatives as it comes from the media lens in a couple of different frames. The first frame I look at is how well are we at reaching a diverse community? And I don't mean necessarily making sure that we're going out and purchasing the Essence Festival directly or that we're leaning into doing Hispanic television, although we do. But truly across all of our, what you would consider more general market ad campaigns, are we actually reaching proportionally a diverse set of the U.S. population? I'm happy to say that when we look at a media campaign and we look at the volume of diverse consumers that we're ultimately reaching with our campaigns, we seem to be fairly on target in reaching this, what the U.S. Census would say is the breakup of the U.S. population. So that's step one. Are we getting the right reach? The second question is, are we investing in the right places to create the next generation of content? And we made the Group M pledge a couple of years ago to have 2% of our media investment be diverse owned. We have an internal goal of 10%, Black owned. We have a diverse goal of 10% internally that we're aiming for. We've reached the 2% goal, so we're very proud of that. The 10% goal we're still working on, but we're going after it in every place we possibly can, right? So we have what I like to call the LUSA Exchange, the L'Oreal USA Exchange, which is a custom list of several thousand sites that we've hand curated to be our allow list, if you will, in programmatic media. We're very proud of that list because it does a few things. It ensures that we have viewability. It ensures that those partners have ads.txt. It ensures that those partners have the scale that we need them to have, that they're not made for advertising websites, et cetera. So it puts them through a pretty rigorous multi-step process to ensure that they're sites that we would be proud to have, my grandmother would be proud of us having our advertising on, right? But the second step was adding diverse-owned partners to that list. And we expanded that list by several thousand to include diverse-owned partners, even if some of them didn't meet all of the other requirements that we needed, because we wanted to make sure that we opened up that opportunity. And I'm proud to say we have several $1 million now that flow through programmatically those sites in that space. And so by attacking it there and then attacking it through partnerships and then attacking it through our media strategies and investments, I think we eventually get there. From a creative perspective, we are always looking to diversify who we show in our advertising. And I think it's an important step, especially for a company that is talking about skincare and skin conditions. Skin conditions appear differently on different skin tones. Obviously, we need to have a wide range of colors in our portfolio, which we do across many of our brands, and all of the brands have a mission of continuing to increase the scale and collection of what they have in their palettes. And we like to make sure that we show. You'll often see one of the common ways to show makeup colors is like swatches on an arm. Yes, and you'll see multiple skin tones in our campaigns or even on our sites that'll have a wide range of skin tones so that you know what that color looks like swatched on an arm that's hopefully similar to yours.
Good. That's great. Talk to me about what excites you the most? Kind of where we're at today. I mean, there's so many things going on outside of rosé. Outside of rosé. But, inside L'Oreal and from a media marketing measurement perspective, what gets you really excited right now?
Yeah, I think there's a few places that I'm excited about. I'm excited about the advocacy and influencer space because I think it's a knot to untie, right? And so I get excited about the complicated knots that we need to go untie. I think those are exciting. I do the same thing with retail media. It's another knot to untie that I feel like we can break some ground here and do some things that are really interesting. The places that I'm tangentially related to, but I get super excited by, are around our creative and the creative assets and the stories that we tell. And I just think I like to remind people of this, we are a house of brands, not a branded house, right? So we are 36 or 38 brands, like I said. I actually can name 31 of them off the top of my head. And I think there's a couple of fragrances I'm missing, which G might have the answers to. So we're gonna do that test later. And so the challenge with that is that some of them are European brands, some of them are American brands, and so the creativity sits within the brand, right? So CeraVe, for instance, they're what we call DMI, or their like internal marketing and creative team, sits inside the United States. Lancôme, on the other hand, sits in France. And they are global hubs of creativity for those brands, no matter where they're located. But they're each individual and very unique. And to me, I think the thing that is potentially exciting is bringing those brands along on the media journey that we're on and giving those internal creatives the opportunity to see what we do with a Meta, with a Google, with a Netflix. Show them where their assets are going to live and what works in those spaces, because they don't get the same exposure that the media partners do. Right. And the couple of times that we've done this, we've done some workshops with Meta, with the DMIs, for instance. They come out like kids in a candy store. They're like, wow, that was so cool. Now we know we could go do this and we could do that. And this is available to us. Like, they get super excited, which is so awesome. I want to do more of that, because I think if we can continue to inspire our internal marketers and our internal creatives, I think we can show up in new and interesting ways on behalf of our consumers.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an exciting time to be in the industry. It really
Yeah.
is. I think we have 1 minute left. I think maybe. So, any final thoughts or anything that I didn't ask that you would love to share?
Ooh. Ooh, that's a good one. Um, no. Do we want to take a question?
We can take a question.
Yeah. I was trying to think
Absolutely.
if there's anything I wanted to.
Anyone
We covered
have
a lot.
any questions?
Does anybody have a question? Yeah.
Okay.
She's got a
Do you want
microphone
the
for
mic?
you.
Oh, she's bringing you one.
Oh, hello. Hi. So when do you think you're gonna have CMM available? Will you know
Yeah.
cross platforms? You know, because I look at the Instagram Reels versus TikToks. They
Yeah.
look similar as a
Yeah.
platform. The audiences are similar. How do you know where to invest? Where which one's better?
Yeah.
When will you know that?
So piloting of CMM is supposed to start proof of concept this fall. So that'll be very exciting, and I think we can see reality of it sometime next year, which will be very exciting. But it is a complicated nut to crack, to be fair. That said, I don't know how similar those audiences actually are, which is it's an interesting point because I think the audience that you're going to get on a TikTok is actually different than the audience that you get in a Reels. Now, you will see the content transversely, which I think is also super interesting. There'll be times when I ask my daughter, "Did you see this TikTok thing?" And she goes, "Where did you see it?" I said, "Well, I saw it on Reels." And she was like, "Yeah, but it started on TikTok, so I saw it 2 weeks ago. Where have you been?" Right? Um, that's not fair. And then there's occasionally the Reels piece that moves over to TikTok. Less often. I think it starts on TikTok often and moves over to Reels. But I think the piece that we have to tease apart is how different those audiences are, and I should say, how differently they're using the platforms. So, and again, I'm going back to using my daughter as like a use case of one here. So don't take it as like law of the land, but I think she's a fairly good representation of her generation. Um, she uses TikTok as consumption. She doesn't post on TikTok much. She used to in the beginning, but it's a lot of consumption. Instagram is where she goes to tell her story. And so she doesn't do as much consumption on Instagram as much as she does on TikTok. And then Snap is all about chatting with her friends. It is a messaging platform first and foremost. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We'll see if that holds true across, the future generations, but I think it's super interesting.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Can we talk about, so if we only have a minute left, the conversation?
Yeah, I think we're good. Go ahead.
Are we good? Can we have 1 minute?
Yeah.
Just because we're surrounded by a bunch of industry people, can we talk for a second about the conversation you and I were having before about training the next generation of talent?
We can. Yes.
Because I think it's super interesting, and I don't know if anybody else is facing this challenge, but I've had several conversations over the course of this week with folks who are struggling with the return to office.
Absolutely.
Right? And are you returning?
We are not. So we have made the conscious decision that we are fully remote. And I think there's numerous benefits to that. We see an uptick in productivity. It's great for retention. It's awesome for recruiting purposes. But I think, everything has a shadow side, and that is it's harder to onboard talent. And I think it takes a little bit longer. And so we're trying to navigate that and find the right balance. And it's not easy. And I think there's not one answer for everyone. I think it really depends on your culture, your company, and kind of what kind of education and programs you have in place.
Yeah. And we've returned 3 days a week to the office, and I think that's it's an interesting challenge because it's any 3 days, right? It's not any specific 3 days, and so I am starting to hear companies talk about. We want everybody in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Don't show up on Monday and Friday, and they're giving kind of that explicit direction so that they can create those cultural moments. I think what I challenge us with, though, and that's why your world is so interesting to me, is my first reaction when we started to come out of the pandemic and people were talking about return to work or not return to work or being fully remote was that gut reaction of how do you train the next generation? How do we get this next group of kids to onboard? They need to hear the conversation that we have. We need to be able to overhear them in the hallway. How many times do you correct somebody or point them in the right direction? Oh, you're having a problem with that. Go talk to so-and-so, right?
Yes.
And if you don't have, they're not going to pick up the Teams call and call you to have that conversation. Right. But then as I've lived it for the past couple of years, I am starting to think maybe that's in my head, and we need to actually think about how we train the next generation, because just because we learned it one way doesn't mean that they're going to learn it the next.
I would agree. And I mean, I can just say, because we do have technology, the technology plays a really big part in that.
Yeah,
and it's a huge connector. And I also think it's incumbent upon all of us as leaders to learn to flex. Yeah. Because to your point, I think the different generations learn They have different styles.
Yeah.
And we have to identify those and then modify and flex our programs so that they meet them where they are and
Yeah.
help them to have an optimal experience.
I agree. Thanks for that.
So, yeah, absolutely. All right.
All right.
I think our time is up.
All right.